Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April 18th work session of the Salisbury City Council. We have a number of items on the agenda today, and we'll begin with Procurement Director Jennifer Miller talking about amending the purchasing thresholds. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Okay, good evening, Council.
Good evening.
I'm sure you're aware, COVID has had a direct impact on what we do in purchasing. Cost of goods, materials, services has increased greatly. I know a couple years ago, year or two, it's a blur right now, we did approach council with raising our, what we call our direct purchase threshold, the threshold at which departments could procure items without having any quotes, from a real small dollar amount of $400 at one time. We brought that up to $2,000. We're coming back to council again, asking for that threshold to be moved up to $5,000, so that anything below $5,000, the using departments could purchase without competitive quotes. And then we're looking to raise our competitive bidding threshold, our formal bid threshold, to $50,000 from its current $25,000. What we would look to do in between that mark of that $5,000 to $50,000 is still ask the departments to get competitive quotes, but we would change that up slightly now as well. Whereas right now, anything between $2,000 and $25,000, departments are asked to get 3 quotes for, okay? Or we put out a request for quotes. We would change that range up slightly so that from about that $5,000 mark to $25,000, we would only require 2 quotes. And then from $25,000 to just under $50,000, $49,999, we would require 3 quotes. So that's the first change that I'm presenting to council this evening. The last has to do with the disposition of surplus supplies. Just adding the word vehicles in the code. It talks about everything sort of but vehicles, supplies, equipment. Thought it would be nice to add the word vehicles in there. Moving that threshold amount from its current $2,000 to $5,000, so that anything below $5,000, the head of the department could decide what to do with it, as long as it met some of our guidelines. And I can talk a little bit more about that to you, what I would propose our guidelines to be. And then anything above $5,000 would come through the Department of Procurement.
Okay, questions from the council?
I guess with regards to the vehicles, now if it would be a little bit of a different process if it was involved in an accident or something, because it includes insurance and everything. So typically, is that done a little differently than just, hey, it stopped working, so we're going to surplus it?
So if the historical cost of the item or vehicle, and it probably would be above $5,000, it would come through my department to decide how to handle that. And whether, a lot of times it's, that's when our insurance carrier gets involved, say if it wasn't an accident, and we really don't, have, much of an opportunity to say resell it. Yeah, so that's when we would enlist, say, Legit to, oftentimes they then sell it as scrap.
Other questions? I just have a couple. Obviously, this is due, well, the idea is to reduce the amount that's coming to the council and also save you some paperwork and stuff internally, correct?
It does.
By raising it?
So what comes to council right now wouldn't change. What comes to council as far as the competitive bidding items is anything above $100,000 anyway. So
Okay.
council hasn't traditionally gotten involved in any awards under $100,000. So that really wouldn't change. And on the surplus side, I gotta be honest, actually in the code, it doesn't even require council's approval anyway for any surplus item. It's always been at taken through the Department of Procurement. I think it's just become a habit that we've done that prior even to me, of bringing vehicles and larger dollar things to council.
And maybe something we want to look at. Because I think certainly from a surplus point of view, it could have impact on the finances.
Mr. President, I'm not sure I agree with that. In terms of surplusing equipment and items that are at the end of their useful life and no longer serving the city, I'm not of the opinion that we need more process around those. As Jen said, our practice has been to bring them to council, even though the code doesn't require it. Transparency is the desire there, but again, we're usually talking about pieces of equipment that are at the end of their useful life. The exception, of course, is when we surplus property, which we go through a lengthy process with council, and there's a long process of determining, what the disposition of that property will ultimately be. So I don't think there would be a material effect, even cumulatively across the course of a year. I don't think there's much,
I wasn't
measurable effect.
I wasn't thinking much of a formal thing. I'm thinking just continue the practice that we have.
I totally agree.
Because I thought that maybe you.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay. No, that's all right.
Making sure that we bring it to council.
Just to know what's
Absolutely.
going.
And if we want to put that in the code, I don't see any problem with it. We all agree that
No,
from a
I think
transparency
it's more for me, is
purpose.
like if, let's say there's a dump truck that's gone off, then we can, it would go in our minds that we can expect to see a dump truck
truck.
request
Yep.
coming up forward, and that's the only context that I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that makes sense.
okay. Okay, there's no other questions? We have consensus to move it forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much.
you're welcome. Next up, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 5-52 to define food service facility. Deputy Fire Chief Chris Obarski. Chief? Along with Eric. How are you?
How you doing, Eric? Good, how are you?
Good to see you.
Once again, I brought my glasses. I brought Eric up here. He's obviously going to let him speak, answer any questions. He's the one who actually was the forefront of this, wrote this. Looking to amend the city ordinance as it pertains to the definition of the food service facility in lieu of restaurant, and also granting the city fire marshal, Eric, the authority to enforce the provisions of Chapter 5.52. Go ahead, Eric. I'll let Eric explain more.
Yeah, it's a pretty cut and dry change we just had. There was no way to enforce anyone that was operating any kind of food service business without a license. So it just became hard. We'd find them, and, we'd come back next year and the year after, they still don't have a license. So we want to just clear that up. And we also ran into a little problem with a few establishments who didn't think they were restaurants. Maybe they were carry-out only. So we wanted to clear up the definition of what exactly the food service facility is and have the ability to enforce it. It's nothing new. It's been in the code for quite some time.
Well, the list is quite extensive, so
Yeah, I think we covered everything.
questions from the council?
Ask me your bait shop question, or?
No, I
Okay.
won't ask.
I can answer for you. That we would have to inspect that.
So we're not discerning between fish and humans. It's
No.
everybody that's preparing
If they're
food.
eating, we're going to check it out.
That was a attempt at humor before the meeting.
See, that's why the bag
I'm
of
just-
candy was taken from you.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly why the candy was taken.
Okay.
My name is Big Chop.
Anybody else?
Because everything I see on here,
Do you, when you're doing your inspections and you're asking, because you obviously want the business license and your certification, are you checking to see that they have a health department certification as well?
This license through the city actually is what prompts the health inspection.
Department, okay.
So they can't, it's everything, without us, they can't get their license. Without the health department, they can't get a license. If they get a license, then the city will let the health department know they need to be inspected. So it kind of checks and balances all the way across.
And the health department does the same to us. If they find one, they'll let us know?
Yep, they typically.
Okay.
And number two, how much is this going to increase your workload?
Inspection-wise, very little. I think it may add. We do, I think, about 280 restaurant inspections, and I think we're going to add a dozen or so. I don't think it's a big deal. 2 or 3 more personnel should cover it.
Ooh.
Well done.
We'll discuss that tomorrow.
You can ask Ms. Glanz what the dad looks like, because I just gave it to you. It's good in jest. Anyway, we have consensus to move this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. Next, we have a resolution to increase Disability Advisory Committee membership from 9 to 12 people, and Executive Administrative Assistant Jesse Turner will make the presentation.
Is this your first?
Jesse, this is the first one? No pressure. No pressure.
No, it's all right. Hello, council. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Disability Advisory Committee to present a resolution to increase their membership from 9 to 12 members. They last increased in 2020, I think, from 7 to 9, and they're looking to increase the frequency of their meetings and also their involvement in the community and with some projects they've been working on, and feel that the increase would be beneficial.
Questions or comments?
It's a very active committee, and a lot of committed people on it, so.
As most people know, this is one that's near and dear to my heart, and as I chaired it for years before becoming a council person. And I will say the people that are on there now are extremely active, and there's more people that want to be on, and I think it's a good thing. I think 12 is a decent number. If anything higher than that, it might be an issue, but I support this. So do we have consensus to move this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Thank you.
Okay. It's a great committee. Next up, we have a resolution to enter into an amended and restated land disposition agreement with Green Street Housing, LLC. And City Administrator Julie Glanz.
Good evening, Council. Before you is a restated LDA. We've taken the last few months to work with Green Street Housing on their agreement here for the redevelopment of Lot 30. The majority of this agreement, and if I'm speaking out of turn, correct me please, Ashley, the majority of this agreement is exactly the same as the last time you saw it. It does put forth the option to lease the parking lot that is adjacent to the property at Lot 30 directly, which is nearest Purdue Farms facility. And it also just states that the project has expanded a little bit to approximately 80 units from its original
About
60.
60.
I think it was 60.
But still has the same affordable housing unit and the
Same.
market on the first floor. So if you have any questions.
Questions from the council?
Is this one building or 2 buildings? Just looking at one of the renderings, I was just curious.
Tom, could you state your name so that we have it for the record?
Good evening, Council. Tom Aid with Green Street Housing. It is proposed to be 2 buildings. One building will have the ground floor amenity space for the residential and the market. The other building will have parking.
Other questions for Tom or? No? Seem pretty straightforward.
Yes.
We have agreement to move it forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Next, we have an ordinance to require a permit to remove certain trees and require replacement or payment in a tree restoration fund. And Nate's going to run us through this, Special Assistant to the Mayor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. Always wonderful to be with you on a Monday. The ordinance we have before you would be to create a tree removal permit requirement. Right now, city residents can remove trees from their property, and we have no way to track how many trees are being removed, and we also don't have any type of requirement that would require them to replace that tree. And as a Tree City USA member, we've tried to take additional steps to become a more sustainable city and foster environmental stewardship. And so working with our sustainability specialist and also looking at what other cities have done, we have drafted the ordinance that you see before you today. A few items to note are that this permit would only be required for trees which have a DBH of 12 or more inches, and that's a measurement that's taken about 4 feet up of the diameter of the tree, and that's diameter at breast height. Permits would be issued by HCDD free of charge, and permit would not be required for trees that had the DBH of less than 12 inches, and upon presentation of proof to HCDD, a permit would not be required for trees that are dead or dying, diseased, or species that have been identified as being infected with contagious, threatening diseases or infected with pests, or that present a hazardous or dangerous condition requiring immediate action for the safety of structures or human life. And so in the packet, we actually included a supplemental document that shows you what this permit application would look like. And this document's important because this would be both for applying for the permit or if you were applying for that exemption if you did not require a permit. Because if you were qualifying for one of those exemptions, you would need to submit documentation showing which exemption you qualified for, just so HCDD could have everything documented. And that is one of the biggest efforts we're trying to make here is to document everything so we can better track trees that are being removed in our city and also ensuring that they are being replaced as needed. One thing to note is that with the replacement requirement, it would be a replacement on a 1-to-1 ratio for each of those trees that qualified as a tree that would need a permit. The replacement would need to be made on the same parcel. If you did not want to replant or replace the tree on your property, you would have the option to pay into a tree replacement fund, which would be administered by field operations. And we're looking at what that fee would be right now. But we've got a few ideas that would essentially offset the cost that field ops would incur with labor and materials to replant that tree, or replant a tree, I should say, on a city property or park. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
Yeah, I do.
I got a couple
So
too.
you're saying a tree more than 12 inches in diameter has to have a permit?
Yes,
And if that tree is under that, it doesn't?
that's correct. And I may also add the permit requirement, if you're using a licensed contractor or tree removal service to remove your tree, it would be incumbent upon that service to acquire this permit. The property owner or tenant would only be required to obtain the permit if they were not using a professional service. And HCDD is fully supportive, I may add.
Enforcement.
Yes.
Are we going to depend on the honesty of the citizen, or are we going to?
So enforcement could be driven by a few mechanisms. One, if you are doing this the honest way up front of applying for the permit, obtaining the permit, HCDD is then able to go and ensure that you are indeed replacing the tree if you're choosing not to pay into the fund. So they have that paper trail to make sure you do replant. Otherwise, if you did not acquire or apply for a permit, enforcement would be driven upon either feedback that HCDD receives from actions being taken or through their normal patrols if they see someone removing a tree, because generally for a tree of this size it would be an involved effort, they could go back and see if they had been granted a permit to do so. And that's also why it's incumbent upon the contracting services to require this permit, because ultimately we're holding them responsible to make sure the process is done correctly.
I think, just as a comment, I think that the cost of the permit should not be prohibitive so as to encourage the people, because the most important thing is getting the tree replaced.
And the permit would be
It's free.
free, and that is in the, I think
Permit's
forgive me
free.
if I forgot that. Yes, the permit.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, I have a couple questions. So the permit's free, and we have, how does this impact homeowners associations that are in the city that have not been replacing trees that were the footprint of the actual development? And it has nothing to do with the landowner. So how does that address that? Or does it?
I don't know that we would be able to remedy past actions taken, because we would just simply be creating this requirement in Title 8 moving forward. But that is one of the reasons, that's part of the impetus, part of the push to take action right now, is because we realize we do have trees that are being removed across the city, and we have no way to track that, and we have no, there's no teeth to the enforcement mechanism, or there is no enforcement mechanism even to require replacement. And so we don't have a way to correct past actions, but
I mean, even going forward, how does this apply to homeowners associations?
Well, then it would be as an organization there. So I guess it would be, move us to email this and applications to homeowner associations and any tree removal services that we know of in the city, to at least make them aware that this is happening.
Yeah, I'm aware of one homeowners association that took down 80 full-grown trees.
Right.
And didn't replace them. And we have to make sure that that's taken care of, because we have quite a few on both sides of the river.
Well, the other thing is, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. All right, so that's a concern in how to really enforce it with homeowners associations who traditionally see that or have not replaced trees that they've taken down that were in the original, I guess, footprint or development of the properties. The other thing is, how would this add, or how much work is this adding to the workload for this particular office? I mean, we're tracking paper, we're tracking compliance.
so on two fronts, there's an HCDD and a field operations component. So on the HCDD front, where they are issuing the permits and tracking compliance ultimately, they did not voice concerns as to the added workload. I mean, there is an added burden on their department, but they're confident that they can help ensure compliance with this. And once again, compliance would just be driven by a few factors, but they already are patrolling on a regular basis, and this would be added to that list of items they would look for. And to your earlier point about the HOAs, by requiring the tree removal specialists or companies to obtain this permit, assuming the HOAs would be using a licensed company, that company would be required to obtain the permit, unless the individual property owners were members of the HOA were doing it. Well, then the HOA would be required to obtain the permit. And then from the field operations perspective, though, to go back to your initial question, workload, Doug Draper is already planting trees in our city parks and city-owned properties. This would simply provide them with a funding mechanism to continue to plant trees, hopefully at an increased rate if we see trees being taken out and not replaced. And also, Vice President Bode, to your point about public relations and having a forward-facing message on this. Our sustainability specialist, Alyssa, and Allison, who works in our comms team, both of them, I emailed both of them and have given them information, and I believe they're going to be coordinating on a public outreach campaign that'll be via Facebook or other social media channels to help inform the public, should this be enacted, that this is a requirement.
I have another question. So is this model taken from any other Tree City?
It is, as was at the bottom of my memo, Dearborn, Michigan, what we're proposing here to amend Title 8 of our code, it's very similar to their process, and actually the application form that we have just as a reference document is very similar. I essentially used what they had as a template for the application form, and the code is very similar to theirs as well. And also, I may add, there are going to be a couple of exemptions to the tree replacement requirement, and that would be if your property was in a, now I have to find it, there, a forest conservation. So if you had a property that was part of a forest conservation plan, you would be exempt. You would be subject to the requirements of that plan, not this replacement requirement. And then another exemption that our city planner noted that we need to add here, and this will be a line item edit that I'll speak with our city attorney about, would be properties that are also located in a critical area. We would want to extend that exemption to them as well.
Any other questions?
If a homeowner is cutting down a tree or having one cut down, you're telling me that they have to have it replaced or another tree in place of that tree?
If it's 12 inches or...
Yeah, I know, I got that part, but, I understand that part. So you're telling me that they have to replace that tree with another tree?
Should this be enacted, that would be the requirement, yes.
It doesn't have to be on their property, though.
It would
Correct.
need to be on that property, or they could pay
Or the
into the
fund.
tree replacement fund.
Right.
Yes.
Which is $125 per tree to be paid to the city tree fund?
We haven't said that. That would actually be established through the fee ordinance, which you'll pass during the budget session. So we haven't established that, but we were thinking $125 or $150.
Per tree?
Per tree, yes.
So a storm comes by, wipes out 3 of my trees.
No,
Well, they would be exempt.
That's different.
That's their
Because
damage.
we have exemptions, and
Yeah.
if you're exempt from obtaining the permit, you're exempt from the replacement requirement, because the replacement requirement is triggered through the permit process. So if you're exempt from obtaining a permit, you would also be exempt from the replacement requirement. And that's why the exemptions are spelled out in the proposed ordinance as well.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Suppose they're just getting rid of the tree because, honestly, because they don't want the tree there anymore.
And then we would want them to replace the tree. That is that's the heart of what this ordinance hopes.
So you're saying, and if they don't want to replace the tree, they have to put money into the fund?
And they could do it in the park, for instance. They could plant a tree in the park.
Okay, I'm just asking because I'm really curious, because to tell someone that they can't cut a tree down, I mean, kind of troublesome to me. And then tell them they have to replace it, and then you tell me they could place it somewhere else, not actually in their yard,
Right.
but they could relocate it somewhere.
That's what the fund would accomplish. They would pay into the fund,
Fund, okay.
and then the fund would
Would
plant
replace
the
it.
trees.
But they're paying $125 for that replacement tree.
If they choose not to plant the tree on their property, yes. But they have the option for free to plant the tree on their property.
And
Right.
just to jump in, we're not, the 125 is a proposal. That is something, when we talk about fee schedules and budget, that is also up for negotiation again, so.
And
I think
I just had a question about the fees. If a contractor is hired, who's responsible for that fee should the person not want to replace it? Is it the contractor that would bear that responsibility, or would it be the resident? Or would the
Resident.
well, that's what I'm saying. Would the contractor add that cost for the customer, or would that customer then be responsible for that? I'm just trying to figure out what that,
The contractor would be responsible for the permit. So if you were choosing, at the time of applying for the permit, you were choosing not to replant the tree, then as part of that application process, you would be passing along that cost.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, just,
So for the permit is free.
correct, yes.
yeah.
Permit is free, but to replace the tree is 100, well, I'm just saying estimating.
If you
I'm just
don't replace the
guesstimating.
tree.
125 to the fund.
And to offer some insight into how that number, we came about that number, and speaking with Alyssa, our sustainability specialist, she advised that many of the trees that we're trying to plant around the city, taking into account the types of species that we want to prosper in our city, those trees for a healthy tree, she said, are generally about $80, and that's sometimes a price we have when we're buying in bulk. And so that is $80 for the tree, and that's just an estimate once again, plus the labor and materials that Field Ops then needs to go and install the tree in a city park. So this fee is just that. It's a fee to cover real expenses that the city would realize in planting this tree. It's not an arbitrary number, and it does actually cover those costs, or at least offsets them. It may not cover them in all cases.
I just have one question. If it's a lot that they're planning on building a house on or building something on and they remove several trees, will they have to replace them for development or pay into the fund as well?
Correct. They would either need to replace as many trees as they removed that were larger than the 12 inches once again. If they're smaller, then there's no replacement, or if they were dying or diseased, once again, there would not be that replacement requirement. I think it's important to take note of the many exceptions which are written in the ordinance as well.
I think that one of the important pieces of this is to make sure that the HOAs, because the HOAs, anyway, we've all dealt with HOAs, so, and there could be problems at times. I'll leave it at that. But we have a list. I know we have a list when we were talking about the draft for the garbage pickup. If you remember that whole thing, and we had that committee, that we have a list of all the HOAs. That department has it. I would suggest that when we get the final thing done, we send it certified mail to each of the HOAs to make sure they have it. Because we're not talking about 1 or 2 trees when they do it. We're talking about 60, 80, 90 trees maybe at a pop if they make a decision to do something. So that would just be one suggestion that I have. Delegate Anderton just popped in and out.
Mr. President, we can work with Rachel Manning, our neighborhood outreach person, to do that. And I just want to add that we know that additional tree canopy leads to healthier communities. And through this process, we can also educate homeowners on the appropriate trees to plant that are appropriate for their lot size in proximity to their household, into their house, so that we're having long-lasting trees into the future.
Great. We have consensus to move it forward?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. And so Mrs. Nichols will make sure that gets on the agenda.
Yes.
And then we will talk about the fees during the budget starting tomorrow morning at 8:30. Don't be late. I am buying bagels, so. Next up, Nate's going to stay with us. Ordinance to update police-directed towing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. This is something that we have been working on for quite some time in coordination and consultation with our Salisbury Police Department, Chief Duncan and Officer Tucker, who I saw in the back here earlier. Essentially, right now, any police-directed tow license company that declines 3 or more tow requests within a 3-month period is removed from the police-directed tow list for 6 months. And what this creates is essentially these companies who miss a few calls are then taken off this list, cannot receive the police-directed tow calls, and they miss out on potential revenue, and obviously there's a smaller pool that our police department can then call upon to perform these services. Our proposed revisions to this section of the code would provide an escalating penalty structure, and in addition to revising the penalty structure, we also are proposing the creation of 2 new types of fees, which would be an additional labor fee and a single-use materials fee. These are fees that we'd like to create because currently there is no mechanism by which the towing companies can receive compensation for tows that require the use of single-use materials to clean up debris, and similarly, there's not a mechanism through which they can bill for additional labor for tows that take an extended period of time to complete. And also in my memo, I detailed each one of the changes to this Chapter 5.64 that this ordinance would enact. I can list each one of those changes if you would like, Mr. President, or...
I would, please.
Okay, I will be happy to do so. So this will revise the structure of the suspension of towing companies who decline police-directed tows calls for service. Under the new penalty structure, companies who decline or miss 3 tows within a calendar year will have their police-directed tow license suspended for 1 month. Following a 1-month suspension, any company that declines or misses a total of 6 or more police-directed tow requests within a calendar year will have their police-directed tow license suspended for 3 months. Second, we would allow tow companies to request to be temporarily removed from the police-directed tow list to avoid being penalized during a time in which they may be unable to perform police-directed tows. We would also require that the vehicles be towed to a storage lot or facility within 10 miles of the government office building 125 North Division Street in Salisbury for all standard or basic tows. And the rationale behind this new requirement would be to ensure that residents are able to retrieve their vehicle. Right now, we have tow lots that are located outside of the city, some further than others, and I know Officer Tucker could offer some insight into that. And the intent here is to make sure that if my vehicle was towed, there would not be no undue burden to go and retrieve my vehicle by taxi or having a friend take me. And we chose this address simply because our city borders are quite interesting, and quite simply, if we said within city limits, 10 miles of any city limit, that could be almost anywhere in the county. And so we were trying to have a little bit more consistency with this requirement. And now under our next change would be creating a non-reusable cleanup fee to offset the cost of single-use materials used to clean up the scene of an accident. We'd also create an additional labor fee to provide compensation for additional labor that is essential and or required for roadway cleanup. Require that tow companies abide by the Police-Directed Tow Operator Code of Conduct. And this is a code of conduct that we've created. It's actually a code that Procurement had created a while back, but was never standardized across all city vendors. And so we're looking to use that for our police-directed tow operators. Also, this would clearly articulate when a release fee shall be charged for after-hours, weekend, or holiday vehicle releases. We would clarify when inside storage fees may be charged, and we'd also create a self-adhesive film wrap fee. This would be a fee for when a vehicle needs to be wrapped after the scene of an accident. Right now, the tow companies don't have any mechanism to recoup the money for that service that they're providing. We'd also establish various requirements relating to record retention and establish the police department's right to conduct a periodic review of company records to ensure compliance with regulation, barring corporations or companies from holding a financial interest in another company holding a police-directed tow license. We also would enumerate certain items which are not considered to be personal property for the purposes of Section 5.64.130. We also state that magnetic signs do not satisfy the requirements of Section 5.64.140. One note on that, there was a concern that tow companies could have a magnetic sign and have one company name, and then they could remove that sign and have another company name displayed on the same tow vehicle, and we'd like to help clarify the regulations there. And we'd also revise Section 5.64.160, violations and penalties, to state that violations of Section 5.64.100 shall be subject to penalties in accordance with the provisions enumerated in Section 5.64.100. Simply what that's saying is the violations section does not apply to the section of the code which talks about police-directed tow declinations, because we have our own escalating penalty structure that we're proposing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. In the memo where we speak about each one of these changes, I also reference the specific section of the code in parentheses, so you can go and see exactly where we're proposing that change. I know that was a lot to digest, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think I have several here.
I know, and I've looked through this, and I like everything that's in here. Have we looked at or discussed, and as I didn't see it in here, the increasing or allowing the increase of the tow fees to be more? I know in some cities it's more, and I know gas is more expensive and everything's more expensive. So I don't expect these tow companies to be restricted to fees that reflect 10 years ago.
Absolutely, and I would note that this ordinance simply establishes new fees and changes current practice. As you know, Vice President Boda, all of the fees are established through the fee schedule ordinance, and so that was not within the scope of this this ordinance here.
We're gonna handle that starting tomorrow.
But Muir, we are looking at increasing some of those fees.
I hope so.
Specifically accident tows.
Yeah, okay.
Because those are more labor intensive. And
Yes, and at the recommendation of some of the companies that we've spoken with as we're putting this together.
Okay.
Questions? April?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Just a couple of comments. I think two things, and I know we have quite a few gentlemen that I recognize from my time in the fire service in Fruitland. And I will say this, that I'm not sure the reason that it happens, but there are times, and we all know there are, when you call for a rig and you sit and wait in the snow or the cold and the rig doesn't show. And it seems to be repetitive at times. Now, there could be two reasons for that. The first reason could be that the fees are so low that they don't want to pick them up. And the other one is that it's too cold and they don't want to come out. And I would hope that's not the situation all the time, but I think in several instances, I know that it's been discussed. So I think they have to be fair and equitable. But by the same token, I think there's an obligation on the drivers. And we all know what we're talking about. When there's a need on the bypass and there's traffic coming down, the safest way to protect everybody is to get the vehicle off the road. And that's the prime objective. And I think whatever we need to do to make sure that that's done in a safe and appropriate manner with reasonable compensation, I think that should be our goal. But it's a two-way street, and it's an obligation on both sides. And I hope that we understand that that is that way. So we will pick up the fee portion of it, which is important, during the fee discussions, during the budget sessions. But I'm glad that and I will tell you that this has been in the works prior to any problems that we've had. They've been working on this, I know, for several months. So we'll do the best, and they will do the best we can, and hopefully we'll come to a good situation. No, you can't. We'll allow for comments at the end of the meeting.
Thank you so much. I didn't know what the
Yeah, the procedure is you'll be allowed 4 minutes at the end of the session, and you can all have your say if you like. Anything else? We have consensus to move it forward?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And that's pending the fee schedule. Thank you. Thank you, Nate. Oh, we got another one. You're still, are you here for, you're here
Not
for
that
the
easy to get
duration?
rid of,
Amanda's not
Mr.
here,
President.
Nate is.
You drew the short straw, is what you did.
He's been waiting.
All right, now we have an ordinance to amend vacant buildings to require registration of vacant lots and payment of annual fees.
Yes, Mr. President, this is another item that we've been working on with HCDD, who is also fully supportive of what we're about to propose here. Currently, the city charges a flat rate of $200 a year to list a building on the vacant building registry, and all buildings that have been vacant for more than 180 consecutive days are required to file a form with HCDD to be included on the registry. And in addition to this registration requirement, condemned buildings are required to register within 30 days of condemnation. We seek to amend Chapter 15.22 of the City Code to require an annual inspection of all buildings on the vacant building registry maintained by HCDD which have been vacant for more than 180 consecutive days. And the administration is also seeking to require the registration of vacant non-residential land upon which there is no ongoing permitted construction. And then in addition to the changes proposed in this ordinance, the administration once again intends to suggest related revisions to the annual fee schedule, which would be submitted to you for your consideration during the budget hearings as well. And to offer a little bit of insight, as you know, Mayor Day's Here is Home program has brought development to our city, and it's also turned our attention to ways in which we can continue to encourage and foster home ownership and development. And unfortunately, what we see is many buildings throughout our city that may sit vacant simply because it's easy to allow a building to sit vacant within the city when you're only charging $200 a year for it to be listed on this registry. By incorporating this inspection requirement, we're going to be providing for the public safety aspect of having a vacant building, as our HCDD is going to be authorized and actually required to inspect each one of these buildings to ensure that it does not pose any threat to public safety. And in addition to that, we also wanted to require that non-residential lots be registered, so that would be like your commercial or industrial lots, simply because we recognize that we only have so much land in our city. We are continuing to encourage development, and so we're trying to disincentivize individuals or groups that may want to just sit on vacant properties and do nothing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Once again, I think there will be a larger discussion of this issue when it comes time to consider the FY 2023 fee schedule, because there we are going to propose a substantial restructuring of those vacant registry fees.
I think that's going to be a long discussion this year. Questions, other questions from the council?
Vacant properties, we're also including vacant homes as well.
Yes.
In that fee, but not a residential lot in a neighborhood that's well-maintained.
Correct.
Okay.
It would be a non-residential land would be the only scenario in which we're charging that fee to unimproved land upon which there is no ongoing permitted construction. Other than that, your house would still, the requirement would still be that you are listed on the registry if it's vacant for more than 180 days, but that is the current requirement anyway. We're just adding the inspection element to that in this ordinance. And just for reference, there are, as of April 14th, there were 108 vacant properties on the registry, and there were 36 open condemned on HCDD's record.
Are we charging the same fee for condemned houses versus vacant houses? I would consider raising the fees on condemned houses.
Are you saying there were 108?
Yeah.
In the city of Salisbury?
Vacant, yes.
I don't believe that.
For more than 180 days. Well,
That's what's registered.
That's what's registered.
Registered.
Oh, okay.
And that's registered, and that is over half a year. So if it's vacant
They have
for less
6
than a
months to
week.
register if a house is vacant.
Yeah, I would just suggest that those that are condemned, we sort of put a little bit more pressure on
When
to do
we have
something.
our fee schedule conversation, there is opportunities to discuss tiers or recommendations. So.
Perfect. Okay, other than the fee schedule, we have consensus to move?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Are you finished?
I think I am, unless you tell me
Because you
otherwise.
keep asking for money, so. just-
More work.
All right, thank you, Nate.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Next, we have a charter amendment to adjust council district boundaries. Ms. Glanz, you're going to take us through that.
Yes, so the charter amendment resolution before you is coming to you because of the 2020 census and the redistricting exercise that we went through a number of work sessions ago. So these are the recommended changes that we all had consensus on in that work session, and the long, detailed language surrounding the boundaries of our future 5 districts, which will make it, I think, much easier for folks. Although our city is oddly shapen, these districts make a lot more sense, and this is just the resolution to go along with that.
Pictures are better. You should have added a picture in here.
Right, I was thinking the same thing.
I'm looking forward to Ms. Boucher
Yeah, I have to read
to
this.
read the thing.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're taking all of that
Should
out.
start on Monday and then go till Tuesday.
I'll take that whole bag, probably read that.
Let me just say this about the new boundaries. The way that the city did it, we took it and gave it to the GIS people, and the politicians and the political proponents stayed out of it. And we came up with a logical, clean boundary system where all of the populations are even going across. There was no discussion about, and I will tell you, and I want to say this because someone brought it up, that because, for instance, my district goes across the river, that maybe it was gerrymandered, has nothing to do with it. It's just the fact that the GIS guys put the numbers in and came up with the thing. I think the federal government and the state government could take a good lesson from the local government and stay the heck out of making up false boundaries. I'll leave it at that. Is that okay? Thank you. So do we have consensus to move this forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Glanz, appreciate it. Next, we have a charter amendment to reflect the city's contemporary legislative districts. And
So this second charter amendment resolution before you is tidying up language that we found in the charter. I think Kim Nichols brought it to our attention. That there was some outdated language around election dates and years. So we are essentially just scratching that to be updated with what we're actually doing in practice with November elections.
any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we have, I assume we have consensus?
Yes.
You have a question, April?
I'm confused. I'm sitting here looking at the District 1 and I'm just like,
Hadn't changed since last time we looked at it.
no, but it doesn't say anything about some of the areas that I was in. So that's why I'm kind of confused with, I know.
You probably picked up some areas in another, that's what happened, because I lost some to somebody and picked up some from somebody.
Some of these are familiar, but then I don't see Lake Street. I do see East Palm. I don't see Lake Street.
These are just the boundaries that are on listed.
It's the boundaries, so it's not.
You're looking at the boundaries, not every street.
Yeah. Look at
That's what it is.
We can get you a mapping.
Look at the map and
Yeah,
just,
please give me the map.
yeah, It's on the last, yeah. It doesn't go by street. Okay. I believe that these charter amendments are only the second time since I've been on the council we've done charter amendments, which is the way it should be. The charter is a sacred document, really. So, okay, and then we have charter amendment to reflect the city's contemporary election of mayor and council.
So again, the final charter amendment is scratching dated language that refers to Tuesday of April 11th, different districts, and it adds in the voters of the city shall, on the first Tuesday in November in the year 2023 and each fourth year thereafter, elect a mayor whose term of office shall be 4 years and until his or her successor is elected and qualified, and 5 council members whose terms of office shall be 4 years until their successors are elected and qualified. All elections shall be held and conducted in accordance with the provisions of this charter, the city code, and applicable ordinances, which may include provisions of early voting. So again, just bringing us up to what we are doing in practice.
If we had to wait till November 11th every, however many years, it would be an issue.
I have one question. Jay, don't look at me like that with your father book. My thing is, in my very first election, there had to have been some changes because when I went into my district, a lot of people didn't recognize me as being a person that represented that district, and that was over there for Camden Avenue, and they were like, well, we thought it was someone else that was represented, and at that time it had been a change then. It had been a change. What I hope to do with this change is to make people better aware of the changes that are being made so people will know. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, so people will know where their district lines are.
Once, if I could, I think what's going to happen is we now have the ability, in the past, we had the ability to go in and plug in your address, and it would tell you whose district you were in. I believe that's going to be updated with the new GIS numbers that we have. So if you want to see where it ends, like what you're talking about is when they ended my district at Virginia Street, and you picked it up from Virginia down, and that was done.
It's been like
6 or 7 years ago. And the latest one will be reflected the same way. So if you want to see if someone is in, or what district someone is in.
No, I don't want to see
somebody
wanted,
right,
and somebody in their district want to know
right,
who's representing their district, because there's a lot of confusion and a lot of people don't realize it. The people can't even separate the county from the city.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have trouble with that.
Yeah, so they can't do it, and then now we're redistricting again.
Right.
So that's more confusing for some people. So what I'm saying is we need to be more prominent in
marketing,
the act, so people will be able to determine who's representing them the next election.
Maybe we can put something, a spread, like from Chris on how to find out in redistricting where you live.
We can
or
do
what
that.
district you're in.
Local elections are always a challenge, but we will do our best.
Yeah. Would that be okay? Then we'll.
Yes, because I just don't want to go somewhere and then people looking for somebody else to represent them. And you're like, oh, God.
No.
I just want people to know. I want them to be aware, because people do have the right to know who's representing them.
Agreed. Okay, that concludes the items on the agenda. I will now, anybody that would like to speak, you can have 4 minutes. Please come up and state your name and your address, and then I will time you. We're going to do it just like we do during the budget. Can you go to the podium? It's going to be, you get...
Can I Can I hand out this paperwork that I brought with me?
Sure.
I'll do it for you if you want to.
I'm here on behalf of the updates that council so graciously.
name
Don
first?
D'Aquila from D&D, and our address is down here, 225 Cypress Street. I want to thank council, mayor, administration, Police Chief Duncan, Officer Tucker, and all the members that have shown up here today to hopefully help us get some things moving forward. And I want to thank you all for taking this up. Very, very important in my opinion. I've got a little outline here, and I'm going to take it a little bit out of sequence. I'm sure you all know, as we all know, the understanding of fuel costs, labor costs, insurance costs, vehicle maintenance, have all gone up. On page 2, I had a understanding from Danzy Brothers, who's the premier supplier of trucks in this area. Not everyone buys from them, but he put together how much the trucks have increased in pricing. On page 3, the understanding of the insurance. The insurance market is a premier insurance vendor in the area, and if they don't represent most of the people in this room, they represent the companies that do, and the cost of that having gone up as well. On page 4, we have the understanding of some proposals that were being made associated with the ordinance, and I heard you loud and clear that you're going to take up this information with regards to the ordinance. I don't want to say that I stand here and speak for everyone. I have had lengthy conversation with a lot of the tow providers in the Salisbury area and gotten their opinions. Whether or not their opinions are similar to mine, I don't know that to be factual. I've been a businessman for 45 years, and on page 4 or 5, I put a list of understandings down associated with what I believe to be fair and competitive and something that needs to be considered by council moving forward. A lot of them were already discussed with the astute gentleman from the city, and several of them were not. The understanding of the fees, I think, again, speaking for myself and lengthy conversations with a lot of the providers, that these fees should be in this vicinity, if you will. If we can be of any assistance going forward to try to facilitate anything, we'll be glad to. Also on page 1, if I can back up, the understanding of making some changes to the present ordinance with regards to suspension, giving 5 days business notice if you're unable to respond, whether you're on vacation, whether you're going to a family function, whether there's someone that's passed in the family. I think it only fair that you be taken out of service with proper notification and proper approval. The City of Salisbury graciously went and did all new signage for all of us at the city expense recently, and with the induction of some new fees, they're certainly going to have to redo that, or we're going to have to redo it, whatever your pleasure is. But in lieu of that, I thought that rather than go through the signage with all the fees listed, that we possibly consider doing a sign that says authorized tow facility, City of Salisbury, with the ordinance under it. So that if someone wants to look up the ordinance associated with the fees, all they do is take the sign, spot like a Maryland State Inspection Station, if you will, authorized inspection station, authorized tow facility with the ordinance under it. It would streamline the process going forward, and that way the signage wouldn't have to be done at anyone's expense, and we could just have that and they could defer to the ordinance. The disposal certificates that we get when someone does not retrieve their car sometimes takes a little bit longer than I personally believe that it should. I'd like there to hopefully be some sort of understanding that once the tow service has provided all the pertinent documents that the city has requested, that we have some sort of a maximum timeline that the city would have to respond to give us those documents. I was proposing 60 days. That way it would allow us to get the abandoned cars out of our facilities that are just sitting there taking up space and move forward.
Can you wrap up, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, sir. Got it. And I just two other things. They're on the bottom of page 1. You can go ahead and look at them later on, and I'll defer to that. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else?
How you doing? My name is Tim Morgan. I represent Morgan's Towing. Currently live at 613 Irene Avenue in Salisbury. In regards to this ordinance, I think it's came a long way. It's definitely an improvement. I don't think that we're there yet. I kind of wish that the towing people that were here had been given a chance to have some input in it. No one would have known about this if I didn't come to the meeting last Monday, and I did my best to call every tow provider I could find, and they had very little input in this ordinance that directly affects them. That being said, I think the fees, there's still some more room to take into account what the other people have said about the cost of vehicles and insurance. I think that we should have a fuel surcharge. I mean, diesel fuel is $5.50 a gallon, and it's certainly not going to get any cheaper in the future. And in regard to the abandoned vehicles, I believe that we do need to streamline that process. I would say probably 50% of the cars we tow, we don't get paid for. And when the city hires a plumber, they don't pay the plumber with broken pipes. So why should we receive these broken cars and no compensation for it? You know, the city has in the ordinance to fine the people that aren't picking up their cars. And no offense to anyone in the city, but they enforce part of the ordinance and not other parts of it. So if we're going to have this great ordinance, let's enforce all of it and look into fining people who abandon their cars in tow lots. Otherwise, we simply get stuck with garbage that has no value to us, and we have incurred expenses for labor, workman's comp, insurance, fuel, and everything else, and we're stuck with basically trash. So I'd appreciate if someone would take in consideration enforcing all of the ordinance, not just the parts that suit the chief or whoever does the enforcement of the ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm going to be real quick. I think we need to add dollies and skids to the fees because, you know, some of the newer cars, all-wheel drives, electric emergency brakes, you know, if we don't have keys and stuff, we can use the skids, drag them up on rollbacks, or, you know, we got some wrecker drivers. We can just put them on the dollies, you know, and, I mean, it costs money to get them, so. That's all I got.
What's your name, sir?
I'm sorry. My name is William Gray. My address is 747 South Camden Avenue, Fruitland, Maryland.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Schaefer with Salisbury Towing, 106 Poplar Street, Fruitland, Maryland. I'm just going to give y'all a quick little scenario that happened last night when I got a call from the city of Salisbury to go do a tow. It was at 11:43 a.m. or p.m., I'm sorry, right before midnight. Father of 4 at home. So I get out of bed, I go do the tow. It's a 2002 Mercedes, drunk driver, smacks a tree. Car's totaled, wheels broke off. Took us about 45 minutes to safely get it loaded, get it strapped down, and get it back to my lot. The guy comes to my lot today. He has liability insurance. He's not paying for the car. The insurance company's not paying for the car. I now have a 2002 Mercedes-Benz in my lot to go with the other 8 cars that I have that I'm now stuck with. It's probably going to take me a minimum of 6 months to get these cars off my lot. I also have to pay lot rent for my lot, and I have to pay all the other bills that are associated with the towing company, including $26,000 a year just for my insurance. That's not including the cost of the trucks. That's not including the cost of fuel, cost of drivers, cost of workers' comp, or any of the above. For $230 is what I'm allowed to bill for my call last night at 11:43 p.m. for a car that I'm now stuck with to go with my other cars. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Make some notes. Anyone else? Thank you, gentlemen, for your input. Now, call for administration comments for the good of the order. I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry.
Well, it was fun to do a long one again with you all, and I appreciate the Nate show. Appreciate all the comments from folks tonight. Nate's been taking notes, and I think there's a lot of really important points that were raised, so we'll circle back. And I don't know if there's a lead contact, if it was you. Well, if you want to figure that out, maybe let Nate know. Okay, sure. But we'll make sure that we let folks know what changes are made from comments that were discussed tonight. Looking forward to budget session tomorrow, a long day, starting at 8:30. I hear Jack's bringing bagels. But we're excited to share with you the budget that we put together. So looking forward to that. Currently, the reason the mayor isn't here is holding a press briefing, if you will, with Carl Anderton, Delegate Anderton, sharing some of the great news with the state budget that was finalized a few weeks ago, which includes $500,000 for rail trail, $250,000 for a zoo Andean bear exhibit planning, additional funding and including operating and capital funding for the Truett Street Community Center in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, funding for junior achievement, additional police funds that we will see here in Salisbury, and increase to the highway user revenue. So good things for Salisbury. Just wanted to give you the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, the highway user revenue is very good news. I was concerned about that. Maybe we can do some streets, a few streets, a lot of streets. Mr. Boda?
I would just ask, when you guys are putting in some more information, I know we took some notes on a couple of things. Dollies and skids, if you have an idea what it costs what that cost is.
I think like 35 hours.
Okay.
I'm not trying to beat anybody up.
Yeah, I would just say, let's gather that and get it to Nate, so then if we have anything we need to add. And then the one scenario that was given to us, and I understand when you guys come into an abandoned vehicle that it sits there, because it takes you a long time to even get the title transferred. So, yeah, so what I would say, if you have a cost on that, on what that is, that would be an idea where we could attempt to pass that on if somebody's walking away from it and said, I don't want it. It's not fair to you guys. So if we have an idea on what it would cost through that whole process, let's get that to Nate as well, so we can maybe try to find a way to incorporate that. Other than that, I appreciate all the comments from you guys coming up here tonight. Community-wise, Third Friday was great. I took in a little bit too much pollen Friday night. But no, it was good to see a lot of people out. There's probably a couple thousand people down there. And my only disappointment was Lions, which is my rum provider, was not there. So, but they're supposed to be there next month. So other than that, see everybody tomorrow at 8:30.
April?
For the gentleman who spoke, I'm glad you came and gave us some information that was much needed. And I understand cost of towing is high. I know, because I've had to have my car towed. So, and I know gas is high, so we need to collaborate with you all. So that's one good thing. Like I said, it's nice being back with everyone again. And this time a little longer, because our last one's been 5, 10, 15 minutes. But we've been here for a while today. So it's a good thing. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's safe. And I would also like to thank everyone who came out to the community Easter egg hunt Saturday at the Billie Jean Jackson Park. It was phenomenal. What I did like about it the most, it was multicultural. It was everyone was out there, so everyone had fun. Everything was free. Even adults had fun. So I'd like to thank everybody who came and everybody who donated, participated. Thank you so very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, April. Angela?
I certainly did appreciate the towing industry coming here and explaining to us a few things. I learned a lot this evening, and I think moving forward, we'll be able to improve a lot of things on both ends. I do want to remind people, I know it's spring and the pollen's in the air and everything else is in the air, but please be aware. And I think last time I talked about, being aware of our first responders and getting out of the way of ambulances and fire trucks and so on, but school buses too. I saw some cars literally just blowing by the buses as the kids are getting off the school bus. Please, please keep safety in mind. School will be out soon enough. This is a reminder for Earth Day at the zoo on Saturday from 10 to 4, I think. I think it's a free event to the public. There's a lot of different activities going on there, plus you'll get to see the twins. And as always, if you're healthy enough, please donate blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Michelle?
Well, Angela stole mine. But thank you guys for coming out and making your voices heard. We always appreciate hearing from folks. So, and I hope everybody had a safe and happy Easter.
Thank you. It's good to see people who are concerned citizens at the meetings, and we thank you for your input. Hopefully, we can make some adjustments. Again, please pray for the people in Ukraine. They need all the prayers they can get. They had a rough day today, if you've been paying attention. And as always, I second Angela. Our blood supply is in bad shape. Please, if you can and you are able, please donate blood. I think we're at a day's supply is the last number I heard, which is really not much at all. So if you can donate blood, please do that. Thank you for your attendance. We hope to see you again, and we'll see you next Monday. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.